Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to my channel, the best place for youth and parents to learn more about education and soft skills. Now, in today's video, I want to talk about the difference between personality types and personality traits. And this is something that I've been facing time and again, where I tell people I do personality testing and some of them come up to me and they're like, oh yeah, do you do MBTI? What personality type are you? Hey, what kind of match should I have? And I'm like, yeah. I generally am rendered speechless in those situations because personality science has progressed a lot since it was first started. The whole paradigm of personality types has essentially been around since the 1930s, right? And it really started with the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And what we find statistically is that 89 out of the 100 Fortune 100 companies use it for training and hiring and so on. And so I'm not here to bash the MBTI. It has its uses and it really has contributed a lot to personality science in terms of people knowing about personality testing. But in this video, I want to focus on the difference between personality types and personality traits. And famous tests that use personality types would be the MBTI, Enneagram, DISC, and StrengthsFinder, or any other personality test or strengths indicators that say that you're this type of person. Personality science has become a lot more nuanced and a lot more refined since then. And so in this video, we're gonna dive into the major differences between personality types and personality traits and why you should use the latter instead of sticking with types. The first major difference between personality types and personality traits is that personality types give you only positive results, right? Can you imagine taking a personality test and then saying that you are an unstable person and you are terrible and your life sucks and you know, blah, right? That is pretty terrible. And personality tests that tell you who you are won't sell simply because some people would get undesirable results. So if you look at all the tests, personality tests that we have out there that use types, they all are positive things, right? And none of them would paint anybody poorly. So that's one aspect of personality types that's not very useful. On the other hand, personality traits will tell you these are the traits you have. You're not like this all the time. Sometimes you're like this, sometimes you're like that. It's about the battery that you have. So for example, introversion, right? Everyone knows the difference between an introvert and an extrovert, but it's not saying that an introvert can't do extroverted things. It's more like, yeah, your battery for introversion, meaning time alone to do focused work, is much higher than your energy to go and be around people all the time. And so that's one major difference between personality types and personality traits. Which brings us to the second point, which is that personality types would put people into neat categories. And like I said before, people cannot be fit into neat categories. So for example, there's the introvert, there's the extrovert. Everyone knows these terms. Introverts are those who have energy to be alone. Extroverts are those who have energy to be with other people. But there's actually also the ambiverts. And what an ambivert is, which is the majority of the population, which is 1/3 of the population, 36%. And ambiverts are people who can do a little bit of introversion and extroversion. And even then, there's a difference between ambiverts, because an ambivert can be an ambivert because, and this is a math thing, like you can have 100 and a 0 and then it becomes the average. So if this person can be extreme, they can do an extreme introversion and an extreme extroversion. Or this person could be consistently scoring at 50, which means they can handle medium amounts of people. And so even for ambiverts, there's two types of ambiverts, right? So using personality traits allows us to have a much more nuanced understanding of personality and people. The third problem with personality types versus personality traits is that people love certainty. And of course, when someone is told that they're a facilitator and this is a type of person you are, and they feel it's very certain, and they're like, oh, I'm a facilitator, that's my gift, oh, right? But that's not very helpful, because in reality, facilitators, sure, that may be your gift, that may be your personality inclination, but doesn't mean you're good at it, right? If you don't have the skills and you haven't developed the chops for it, it doesn't make you a good facilitator. So people love that certainty, but the reality is, yeah, you have a personality of a facilitator, but it doesn't mean you have the chops to be a facilitator. So compare someone who is a facilitator with 0 years of experience compared to someone whose personality may not be a facilitator, but they've been doing this for 20 years, right? You're gonna find the person with 20 years of experience to be a better facilitator regardless. Even though they're not that type, they're just better at it because they've developed the chops for it. And so, once again, it gives people certainty, it gives them something positive that they like, but it doesn't make it real. It's just giving people an identity. The fourth problem with personality types as opposed to personality traits is something called the Barnum Effect or the Forer Effect. And what that is that vague descriptions are difficult to argue against. When you tell someone that they're a critical thinker, for example, if that's their strength, what that is gonna tell that person like, oh, I'm a critical thinker. It's a very vague description. Like honestly, if you tell someone that they're not a critical thinker, that's kind of like an insult. Everyone is critical to some degree. What the Barnum and Forer effect essentially means for personality types is that it's only a vague thing which you kind of relate yourself to, but it may not be real, but it's vague enough that you feel that it can't apply to you and therefore you're good with it. So in this sense, personality typing can essentially be very similar to fortune telling, horoscopes, or other forms of pseudoscience. The fifth major problem with using personality types as opposed to personality traits is that it's actually methodologically flawed. And when we talk about methodology in social science, it basically comes down to validity and reliability. For validity, it's whether the instrument, the personality test, is actually measuring what it says to be measuring. And for a lot of the personality type exercises, there are validity problems of it. So for example, using MBTI, right, and this is not me saying it, this is published in a 1989 paper called Reinterpreting the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator from the Perspective of the Five-Factor Model of Personality by Costa and McCrae. And this paper basically outlined the problems with the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI, and why it's not actually measuring what it's supposed to be measuring. And one of the main reasons is because there is a poor application of Jungian theory. And Jungian theory is basically a personality theory developed by Carl Jung, right? And what we find is that Catherine Cook Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers, which is mother-daughter tandem, they created the MBTI in 1945. And what the problem is that number one, it's based on a theory. Number two, the theory was poorly applied. Number three, they actually have no psychology training. So basically, this test was created by people who love the idea of personality, but they actually didn't know how to test it properly. And of course, over time, MBTI has refined their instrument, but it's still not it's still built on shaky ground. And for methodology, the second problem is reliability, right? And what reliability is that are these test results consistent? Basically is whether a person taking this personality test a month before will have the same personality a month after, right? Like, is it going to give the same results? So one major check for reliability is called the test and retest reliability check, right? And so there was a paper that came out in 2006 by the Consulting Psychology Journal. What it found was that 50% of the people had different results 5 weeks later. It doesn't really produce the same results. 1 month you can be an introvert, the next month you can be an extrovert. And 1 month you can have a certain strength, the next month you can have a different strength. And so the reliability, meaning it produces predictable results that are consistent over time, it's just simply not the case for a lot of these personality type indicators. Meanwhile, when you're using personality traits, which is spread out across a continuum between 0 to 100 and you're relative to everyone, for personality traits, your rank order doesn't really change throughout your life. So yeah, your numbers may change over your life course, so you may be more extroverted when you're a kid, you become more introverted when you're older, but what happens is that everyone else also becomes more introverted over time. So for example, if you're ranked at the 70th percentile for extroversion as a kid, when you hit 70 years old, you'll still be ranked around 70th percentile for extroversion as an adult. So rank order doesn't really change, and therefore it's much more predictable. And for methodology, there's also the way the tests are constructed. So for example, the older types of MBTI tests, they ask in a forced question kind of way. So pretty much a forced choice response format. It's either yes or no. And a lot of times life, it's not just yes or no. There's like, 0 to 5 or 0 to 7, right? There are preferences and there are situations that are much more nuanced. And so personality types don't really account for that as well in terms of their testing. However, the methodology has been refined over time, but as I said earlier, a lot of the personality type tests are still built on shaky ground. So I've been talking a lot about personality types versus personality traits, and I've been saying that the personality type approach is pretty flawed, right? And so if we are to talk about personality, what is the gold standard nowadays? And so the gold standard nowadays is the 5-factor model, also known as Ocean, also known as Neo-AC, also known as the Big Five. There's basically a whole field of personality science dedicated to it. So if you go on to Google Scholar and you enter MBTI, you're not going to find a lot because psychologists and personality scientists don't use it, period, right? Because it's an invalid tool. But if you go on Google Scholar and you look up the Big Five personality or 5-factor model, basically everything that comes up is going to be based on that. So it's essentially the gold standard of measuring personality because of its high validity, high reliability. And from the field of psychology, there has been 2 major contributions in terms of psychometrics, right? Number 1 is IQ and number 2 is the Big Five. So these are the 2 major contributions, and it's as rock solid as social science can be. So the Big Five does thank MBTI for being the foundation of personality science, and not specifically MBTI, it's more like Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud for building that personality science. But what is the mainstream nowadays is the 5-factor model. So if we're going to be talking about personality, and honestly it kind of drives me crazy and kind of batty every time I hear personality type, the reality is no one uses personality types anymore in the social sciences. It's all about personality traits. Personality type tests are great because of its excellent marketing, because everyone feels good and fuzzy and kumbaya after taking it. Everyone's like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, and we all have our strengths and all that stuff. But it's not exactly helpful. There are a lot of strengths and limitations to all personality traits. So if you want a good outline of some personality traits, please check out the videos I have here. It's on a playlist where I outline certain personality traits and what are the strengths and limitations of each and what you can do to cover your bases. And that is only possible when you recognize that personality is on a continuum rather than it's this type or that type, because otherwise there's, what can you really do about it, right? If you like this video, click the like and subscribe button, and also click the notification bell. And also, don't forget to share with your friends, and leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Take care.